Here's something that should worry every person who owns a Microsoft computer. In a single trading session, the most valuable software company on Earth watched more than $100 billion vanish. Not because sales were bad, they actually beat expectations. So why did the people who understand this company best suddenly panic? Because for the first time in years, Wall Street stopped believing the story Microsoft was telling about itself. And once you understand what that story actually was, you'll understand why Windows 11 became the most hated operating system this company has ever released. This is the story of how a $3 trillion company gambled the reliability of your computer on an artificial intelligence bet, and how that bet is now collapsing in front of 1 billion users. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly why your PC has been crashing more, why your files have been disappearing into the cloud without asking you, and why Microsoft is now quietly trying to undo 2 years of its own decisions. This is Behind the Tech. To understand how bad this got, you first need to understand what Windows actually sells. It's not the desktop, it's not the start menu, it's not even the software itself. For 4 decades, Windows sold one thing: the promise that when you turned the machine on, it worked. That's it. That's the whole business. That promise is why banks trusted it, why hospitals trusted it, why your own office ran on it for 30 years without you ever needing to think about the operating system underneath. So when Windows 10 support ended and Microsoft pushed over 1 billion devices onto Windows 11, they weren't just releasing an update, they were spending decades of accumulated trust in a single transaction. And here's the detail almost nobody points out. Most of those billion users didn't choose Windows 11. They were pushed into it because staying on Windows 10 meant losing security updates entirely. That's not customer loyalty. That's a company with no real competitor giving people an ultimatum. Keep that in mind, because it explains almost everything that happens next, starting with the decision nobody inside Microsoft was apparently willing to question out loud. Picture a meeting in Redmond a few years back. Every major tech company on the planet is racing to convince Wall Street they're serious about artificial intelligence because that's the only story investors want to hear right now. Microsoft has something almost nobody else has: an operating system already sitting on 1 billion machines. So instead of asking users what they actually wanted, the decision was made to bake AI into everything, not as a choice, but as the default. That's how an assistant ends up living inside Notepad, inside Paint, inside File Explorer. Tools people have used the exact same way for 30 years, suddenly rebuilt around a feature nobody asked for. Internally, this wasn't described as a nice extra. It was described as turning Windows into what the company called an agentic operating system, language that sounds exciting in an investor presentation and unsettling in your living room. Because what that phrase really means is your computer stopped being a tool you control and started being a system making decisions for you. Before we get into exactly how that experiment fell apart in public, quick reminder to subscribe, because the next part involves an executive comment that caused so much backlash, he had to shut down replies to his own post, and it's a moment that tells you everything about the panic happening inside that building. Here's where strategy turns into disaster. Throughout the last 2 years, updates that were supposed to fix Windows 11 started creating new problems instead. The blue screen of death, the classic sign your computer has crashed, stopped being a rare emergency and became a weekly, sometimes daily occurrence for millions of people. But the file loss issue is the one that should really bother you. Cloud backup features began quietly moving files off people's own hard drives and into Microsoft's cloud storage without clearly explaining that's what was happening. And in some documented cases, when users tried to delete what they thought was just a local copy, the online version disappeared too, permanently. Think about what that actually means for the 65-year-old small business owner or retiree who isn't chasing the latest tech trend, They're not losing a meme or a game save. They're losing tax records, family photos, decades of documents because a feature they never asked for silently changed how their own files work. And Microsoft's response wasn't to slow down. It was more automation, more AI layered on top of a foundation that was already cracking. This is the pattern every monopoly eventually falls into. When there's no real competitor forcing you to be careful, the cost of your mistakes gets quietly passed on to the customer. Now here's where it stops being abstract and gets personal. Not long ago, the president of Windows went online and openly described the direction of the operating system using that same word, agentic, essentially confirming what users had feared for months. Their computer wasn't just getting new features, it was being redesigned to act on its own, whether people wanted that or not. The backlash was immediate and brutal. Longtime Windows users, IT professionals who manage this software for a living, and ordinary people who just wanted their PC to boot without drama all flooded in with criticism. It got so intense that the executive turned off replies to his own post. Sit with that for a second. A senior leader at one of the most powerful companies on earth had to hide from the reaction of his own customers. That's not a small PR stumble. That's a company discovering in real time and in public that the story they've been selling to investors about an AI-first future had smashed directly into what actual users wanted from a machine they paid for. And people close to the situation say the tension inside Microsoft's own offices was just as real as the tension outside them, which is something we'll come back to shortly. Microsoft loves telling investors that Windows 11 reached 1 billion active devices faster than Windows 10 ever did. On the surface, that sounds like a massive win. But a number like that only tells you how many people were pushed through the door. It says nothing about how many of them wanted to walk through it. Here's the uncomfortable math behind that milestone. Windows 10's support ending wasn't a natural retirement. It was a deadline that left people without security protection if they refused to move. So when this company brags about adoption, what it's actually describing is a monopoly removing the only alternative and calling the result a success story. And once inside Windows 11, users didn't find a cleaner, calmer experience waiting for them. They found constant prompts to subscribe to Copilot, upgrade to Microsoft 365, and store their files in OneDrive whether they wanted to or not. Adoption without a real choice isn't loyalty. It's captivity. And captivity has a habit of turning into resentment the moment people find a way out, which brings us to the group of users who found that way out fastest. Gamers. If you want proof of how far quality slipped, look at what happened to gaming performance on Windows 11. For years, players reported unpredictable processor spikes, inconsistent frame delivery, and handheld devices burning through battery life faster than the older hardware they replaced. For a company that also owns Xbox, letting the PC gaming experience decline this long is almost hard to believe. And here's the part that should really bother anyone who's been a loyal customer for decades. While engineers were reportedly stretched thin building AI features nobody requested, basic performance problems affecting millions of players sat unresolved for years. It took visible defections, gamers moving to Steam Decks, PlayStation consoles, and even Mac hardware before Microsoft finally announced real fixes, expanding the Xbox full-screen interface across more devices and promising better background task management. That's not innovation arriving on schedule, that's damage control, arriving years late only once the company started losing customers to competitors it used to treat as an afterthought. Here's something worth sitting with if you've used Windows since the days of XP or Windows 7. There's a reason so many longtime users describe those older systems with something close to fondness, even though the hardware was slower and the interface looked plain by today's standards. Those systems did one job. They ran your programs. They didn't argue with you, and they didn't try to sell you anything while you were trying to write an email. Compare that to today. where opening File Explorer can surface an AI suggestion, opening Notepad can surface an AI suggestion, and even shutting down your computer can interrupt you with a prompt about a subscription. This isn't really about nostalgia for old software. It's about a basic expectation that a tool should serve the person using it, not constantly angle for their attention or their wallet. Microsoft built its entire reputation on being boring in the best possible sense: reliable, predictable, invisible. Somewhere in the rush to prove it was serious about artificial intelligence, that founding principle got buried under feature after feature nobody asked for. And the frustration you're seeing online right now isn't really anger at AI itself. It's grief for a version of this company that used to respect its users' time. So what does a $3 trillion company do when its flagship product is falling apart in public? According to people familiar with the situation, the mood inside Microsoft shifted from confident to defensive almost overnight. Emergency patches were pushed out quietly, without the usual announcements, specifically targeting shutdown failures and cloud application crashes that had been embarrassing the company for months. Behind closed doors, reports describe real internal conflict between executives determined to keep pushing the AI-first vision and teams begging leadership to simply stabilize the core operating system first. Copilot features that had been aggressively promoted just months earlier were quietly scaled back. A reversal most users will never notice happened because it's easier for a company this size to walk something back silently than to admit a mistake in public. And that exact tension between the story investors want to hear about artificial intelligence and the reality of an operating system in crisis is the same tension behind the stock drop we opened this video with. It's all connected, and how Microsoft resolves it is about to decide whether Windows 11 becomes a redemption story or a cautionary tale people reference for the next decade. Which brings us to what Microsoft is now calling, internally, a performance fundamentals push. Engineers who had been building new AI features are being redirected to fix crashes, stabilize updates, and repair the basic reliability Windows built its reputation on for 40 years. That's a remarkable admission for a company that almost never admits fault publicly. The plan now is to slow down the AI rollout and simply make the operating system work again. There's history worth remembering here, and it's history your generation actually lived through. Windows 8 was one of the most criticized releases this company ever shipped, with a redesigned interface nobody wanted and features that confused longtime users. Microsoft only recovered its reputation with Windows 8.1, a corrective release that quietly fixed what the original version broke. The question now is whether Windows 11 gets that same kind of second chance, or whether trust has already been damaged too badly for a patch to repair it. Because here's the truth. This company doesn't want to say out loud, you cannot outmarket broken reliability. No amount of AI branding fixes a computer that won't boot. Here's the part of the story that connects everything together, and it's not really about software at all. This isn't the first time Microsoft has faced accusations of using its dominant market position to push decisions users never agreed to. Back in the late 1990s, the company faced a landmark antitrust case in the United States over how aggressively it bundled its own software into Windows, using its operating system dominance to make competing products nearly irrelevant. The case ended in a settlement that changed how the company operated for years afterward. Now, fast forward to today, and look at the pattern again. Force an operating system upgrade by cutting off support for the alternative. Bundle a product, this time Copilot, into every corner of the experience, whether people want it or not. Use cloud storage defaults to nudge people toward paid subscriptions. None of this is illegal the way the 1990s case was, but it's the exact same instinct. When you're big enough that customers can't easily leave, you stop needing their permission. The lesson history already tried to teach this company is that trust, once treated as unlimited, eventually runs out. It appears that lesson needed to be relearned the hard way, one crashed update at a time. So let's step back, because this story is bigger than one operating system. What happened with Windows 11 is what happens whenever a company becomes so dominant that its customers stop being customers and start being a captive audience. Microsoft didn't need permission before pushing AI into every corner of the OS because for most people, there was no real alternative left standing. That's the actual cost of monopoly power. It isn't just higher prices, it's the freedom to treat a billion people like a testing ground and only correct course once the stock price forces the issue. The lesson here isn't that Microsoft is incompetent. If anything, this story shows the opposite. Every decision, forcing the Windows 11 upgrade, embedding Copilot everywhere, calling it an agentic operating system in language built for investors, was calculated. It was a bet that AI hype would matter more to Wall Street than reliability mattered to the people actually using the product every day. For a while, that bet worked. But you cannot spend your way to profitability if the product underneath the marketing doesn't function, and eventually, even a monopoly has to answer to the people who rely on it every single morning. Whether Windows 11 earns back that trust this year or simply manages its decline more quietly is still an open question. But if this saga proves anything, it's that even the most powerful company in technology isn't untouchable. It just takes long enough for people to notice and long enough for the bill to come due. If you want to see this exact same playbook, force the upgrade, monetize the captivity, apologize only once the stock drops, play out at another trillion-dollar giant, you're going to want to stick around for what we cover next. Subscribe, because that story gets even messier than this one.